I'm Veronica Dela Cruz, KTVU News.
Second ready.
All right. And a 3 and a 2. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Matt G. Wieland. I'm a parent educator here in Davis, artist, musician, filmmaker, and a skateboarder.
When did you first meet Mike Neese?
Mike and I grew up here in West Davis, in Stonegate. There's a certain area of West Davis called Stonegate, around Marina Circle. He and a couple other kids were part of, like a babysit group, and me and Mike and I think 3 other kids were in that group. And, as you get older, everyone kind of drifts apart. And I think we drifted apart, and skateboarding is probably what got us back together again. We were kind of both into that. Mike was kind of my go-to person. He knew everybody in town as far as the skateboarding and music people. And we were pretty young, like 13, and we would go downtown on our bikes and get comic books, get used records. And that's kind of what started our relationship. Then eventually we both got into skateboarding. I think Josh Peterman next door had a Madrid thruster, and his sister had a Vision shredder, and we both like to ride them, and we'd go around circles in the garage all the time. And Mike eventually got a better board, and I never got a board until later on, until I was, like 12 or something. And ended up getting the Sins Blaster downtown at, what's the name of that place? Pet Cetera. They had Skull Skates there, they had Sims boards there, and they had like the 2 colored wheels. And it was all very like eye candy. You go down to Mountain Sports or the sports shop, and there's a lot of eye candy.
What people do you remember from the East Side Kids?
East Side Kids were kind of like the more dangerous and dirtier. I would run into them from time to time at Central Park. People like Adrian Tucker. I'm trying to remember who else. I was kind of introduced to a lot of the East Davis kids through like the Lewins, and everybody came over to Lewins. Gabe Lewin allowed a lot of kids to hang out at his house. He had like a music studio in his house, and a lot of us kind of, beatnik kids all kind of hung out at his house, and we joked around, skateboarded, and played football sometimes in the rain and stuff like that. I was kind of befriended by the East Side Kids. I'm trying to think who. Sam and his brother, who does all the tattoo work now, tattoo guns. I can't think of his name. Curtis, the Lewins. We eventually introduced to Jeremy Thompson from Sacramento. But the first time I met Adrian was at Central Park, and I think Aaron and Chris Gunny and I were skating there, and this guy shows up with the hair up like this, with fishnet, I don't know what, underwear, long-wear underwear that was all torn up, and some Vans that had the skull and crossbones on it or something. And he did an ollie up on the planter, and he yelled when he did an ollie, then he yelled when he came down, he came over and he did like a yell in our face, "What's up?" And then he rode off, and that was like our first real introduction to Adrian. He was kind of like trying to size us up. And before we could say anything, he was already gone. And I think that was ongoing for years with Adrian. He would show up, or we would show up somewhere where he was. And there weren't that many words. There was a lot of action. People trying to skate and not skating or whatever, but there weren't a whole lot of words. We really didn't become friends till like the early 90s, like 92.
What were the punk shows like?
I rarely, I can't really remember downtown. We had the place. Downtown Davis was interesting at that time, 1982. We had Larry Blake's, AJ Bumps, really good steakhouses. We had the UC Davis Hotel and a couple of other really good places. Before Woodstocks came along, before the library came along, there was a bar there where Woodstocks is now, where really good bands played at one point, and I forget what that place was called. But eventually the library came in there and Woodstocks came in, and the place was moved to Central Park, and it's now like a Davis Museum. But it was like this old trashy house, probably about the size of, like this porch here. There wasn't a whole lot of room. There was like little rooms you can go into from one to the next. And, it was nasty. It had, I think, graffiti on the wall, the smell of puke. Everybody there drank and smoked, so like the cigarette smoke was pretty packed there, along with testosterone sweat, with everyone, pumped up and ready to slam and all that kind of stuff. And there were skaters there. There were girls that had way too much makeup on, and there were jock dudes from UC Davis, and there was a whole mix of crew people there, but there was a lot of angst there. So you always kind of felt a little bit like you didn't want to hang out there too long, like something might happen. And then eventually they had punk shows over at Vets Memorial, where eventually they had a parking lot there in Vets Memorial, so some of the skaters were allowed to skate. And because we first went to Vets Memorial, I don't know, it was probably like 14 for me, 14, 15. Yeah, I remember there was like Henry Rollins type people like at the door that were, your mom bought you that shirt? Giving me that kind of attitude when I walked in. But after a couple of years, they got to know who I was. They saw me skating in the parking lot, and I was no longer given that hostility. So it's kind of like you had to earn your way in a little bit. But again, the inside of a punk show always had that same kind of atmosphere. Hostility, violence was in the air. There's the smell of alcohol, sweat, too much cigarette smoke, like nasty cigarette smoke everywhere, and people like kind of pumped up to beat some butt, and they're like, the trashy people. They're like, it's the different kinds of people that came in there. So it's always kind of entertaining. But I never really wanted to hang out there. And actually, as I don't know, my later teen years, I kind of lost interest in going to punk shows. I kind of regret that now. I kind of think that, that was kind of the golden years of that time, because they're not around anymore. It's hard to find, like real good punk shows, like in someone's garage, or like a small little venue where you just pay $2 to get in. A lot of these punk shows, it was just like $2 or $3 to see 5 bands that might have sounded a little bit the same. But yeah, it was a pretty cool environment.
What's it been like working on this documentary?
It's been a little bit like being a detective, getting down to the crime scene and the case, but you got multiple crime scenes and multiple cases and multiple witnesses, and the story keeps on changing. And so it's it's a real testament to your soul, I think, working on something like this, how far you want to take it. There are certain things that kind of, I guess, challenge you a little bit with this. the people that I know or have known have been real supportive in wanting to make this. The people I haven't known have been a little bit hesitant at first, but then supportive in wanting to help me make this. A lot of the professionals, pro skaters, people that are sponsored, what have you, people that I looked up to as a kid, they've been super supportive. So after a while, it does kind of challenge you of like, or it questions your whole motive of what this is about. Like, what are you doing? You have all these different people behind you supporting you, and you better produce something pretty good. I remember going to the Auburn Beeble Bowl and talking to Jeff Hedges, and Eric Hutchison came up to me, and I explained that I knew his dad, and then he came back and skated over to me, and he was like, "So what are you doing here? Like, who are you?" And that's kind of the whole emphasis behind, working on this. It definitely questions who you are and what you're doing and your status of what you're doing and why you're doing it. Why was I there? Why am I here? Why am I doing this? Those are questions that I have to ask myself. So it's interesting that he asked me that. And those kind of things not just haunt me really, but they kind of resonate, like questions. Like, I have to keep working on this documentary to keep it better and better and better. And I need to finish it at some point. And so now I'm sort of, there's a hunger to everything. There's a hunger now to finishing it, finalizing it, and making it worthy to everybody. That's a worry in making it. So I have worries, and I have to keep myself in check, and I'm just the lowly paid janitor here, and I own a cat, and I work on my yard. Sometimes I like to draw and paint, and that's who I am. So it keeps yourself in check. This is just a project endeavor that I'm working on, and I hope to do more.